What's going on, everyone? I'm the Alliance Orc and welcome to another YouTube video. And in today's video we are going to be going over the hot fixes that are going to be going live today as soon as the servers come up. But let's not waste any time, let's just get right into it, because I know Scare Bear was a bit of a shorter video today, but there's really nothing you could do to prolong that video, and yeah. But first, one of the changes that isn't going to be shown here that I'm going to mention, if you guys didn't see my pinned comment in the last news video, the manuscript of Endless Possibilities is becoming a toy. If you have learned it already on a tune, it will be automatically added to your collection. If you have bought it and it's sitting in your bag, it's just going to be like any other toy. But I just wanted to address that real quick. But anywho, the hotfix going out today mainly involves a lot of class changes, and we're going to be going over those. Now, I mainly play tank. I do a few DPS classes, so if I seem clueless on some of these abilities, I apologize in advance. So, the first one is for the PvP achievement, It Takes Class. Apparently there was an issue where evokers were not giving credit. That has been resolved. Death Knights. Bone Shield now grants armor based on 80% of your strength. It was 70, so blood did get buffed. Frost, all damage dealt increased by 4 outside of PvP. And Unholy, all damage dealt by you and your pet is increased by 4% outside of PvP. So Death Knight looking pretty good. They got some good buffs. Happy for it. And moving on to Druids. For Feral, rip damage is increased by 10% outside of PvP. Rake is increased by 5%, as is Feral Frenzy. Primal Wrath is increased by 10%. All of these are outside of PvP. So if you go into a battleground, those buffs are reverted. Lunar Inspiration is increased by 10%. Rampant Ferocity is increased by 25%. And for Restoration, Swiftmen now costs 1.4% of your base mana. And from 1.6, Grove Guardian now costs 1% of base mana from 1.2. Wild Growth now costs 3.8, down from 4. Regrowth now costs 2.8%, down from 3.2. That's a pretty massive buff. And Effervescence costs 3%, down from 3.2. So a lot of classes getting buffed, it looks like. Now for Evokers, the Preservation, which is the healing spec, Dream Breath, Fire Breath, and Spirit Bloom will no longer go on cooldown and fail to activate in circumstances where you are crowd controlled at the same time as completing the empowered cast. So my guess is that if you're trying to like complete Flame Breath and you get CC'd, it'll actually just cancel the whole thing versus putting it on cooldown, which I've actually had that happen a few times, lo and behold. So honestly, the one thing they need to do for Evokers is give us that extra reach, because I don't know if you guys know this, but it is physically impossible for an Evoker to pull Nalak. It's physically impossible. That's the buff Evokers need. Just that little bit of extra range. Hunters, all survival damage by you and your pet are increased by 4%. Okay, that is for survival only. Monks for Windwalker. Blackout Reinforcement is now correctly consumed when empowered by Blackout Reinforcement is now correctly consumed when an empowered Blackout Kick is used against an Absorb Shield. So, like I said, some classes I don't play. This is kind of sounding like gibberish to me, but I'm sure you monks understand what this means. Moving on to Paladins. Shield of the Righteous. For Holy, damage is increased by a whopping 30%. as is Consecration. So Holy getting some big damage buff, so maybe Shakadin's coming back. Retribution. Wake of Ashes damage is now increased by 20%. Truth's Wake's damage is increased by 28%. Seething Flames is increased by 28%. Blade of Justice damage is increased by 20%. And Final Verdict's damage is increased by 10%. Priests. For Holy Word Sanctify, the healing is now increased by 25%. Healing is increased by 25%. That was a bit of a tongue twister. Saw that. They tried to get me. Flash Heal is increased by 15. Holy Word Chastises damage is increased by 30. Smite's damage is increased by 30. And Shadow Word Pain's damage is increased by 15. Mind Blast damage is increased by 10% for Shadow. Devouring Plague damage increased by 10%. The Apparitions now do 20% increased damage. And Psychic Link now causes direct damage spells to inflict 30% of their damage to all targets inflicted by Vampiric Touch, which used to be 25%. Restoration for Shamans. All healing is increased by 5% outside of PvP. Lava Burst damage is increased by 20%. Flame Shock and Lightning Bolt are also increased by 20% for Restoration only. Or maybe the other specs, I don't know. Someone's going to have to piddle with that and let me know. But, you know, it's kind of toggled under Restoration, so I don't know if that'll apply to Enhance and Elemental. Affliction. For Warlocks, we resolved an issue causing the cooldown of Soul Swap to sometimes display incorrectly. For Warriors, Cleave damage is increased by 10% outside of PvP, as is Dreadnought's damage, but by 30%. And Deep Wounds damage is increased by 15% outside of PvP. And the Amir Dracel 4-set bonus damage for the triggered Thunderclap is increased to 200% instead of the 100% outside of PvP. For protection, Vanguard now grants 40% increase to stamina, up from 35%, and Ignored Pain now absorbs 5% more. For the Return to Karazhan, oh my god, they fixed it. They fixed it. This has actually been an ongoing bug forever. If you defeat Tony too quickly, it will actually bug the fight out in Return to Karazhan. That has finally been patched. So if you're running Return to Karazhan and you get the Opera Hall for Westfall Story, you can actually just blow Tony up now. Just not even worry about it, because this has actually been a bug forever. Back when I was farming Midnight, there were so many times I just had to... I don't even know, I had to do something because I was literally stuck in that encounter forever. For the Legendary Axe, this applies to you guys who raid all the time. So, the changes making to fyr'alath, the mark of fyr'alath is now correctly applied to all secondary targets of Obliterate, and is additionally applied by Rage of Fyr'alath's Final Strike. The mark of fyr'alath's damage has been decreased by 20%. The Rage of Fyr'alath's duration is now affected by haste. And the Rage of Fyr'alath's damage is now increased by 15%. And you see, there it is. The Manuscript of Endless Possibilities will be changed to the Vial of Endless Draconic Scales. And if you've acquired it, it'll be waiting for you in your toy box. So like I said at the start of the video, that is happening when the servers go live. Now, for the PvP changes, Cloth players in PvP now have 35% additional armor. In retrospect, plate wearers will have their armor reduced by 30%. The Gladiator Distinction 2-piece set bonus is now increased by 15% for damage dealer and tank rolls from 5% and 20% for healer rolls instead of 15. All fear and root effects in PvP may now take 100% more damage before canceling in PvP combat. Oh, wow. That one's kind of big. That's a big one. 100% more damage. That's a lot. For Death Knights, this is all PvP stuff, so none of this applies to PvE, for anyone wondering. Festering wound damage is now up by 180, or is increased by... That's a nerf. Why is it saying... Oh. Yeah, Festering wounds damage is now increased by 180% instead of 195. Death coil damage is now increased to 60% instead of 70. And necrotic wound now absorbs 3% of healing instead of 4%, and heals up to 3% of the Death Knight's maximum health instead of 4. So Unholy got nerfed for PvP. For Druids, Bear Form now increases armor by 175% instead of 220. Moonkin armor is now 100% instead of 125. And Deep Roots increases the amount of damage required to break it is now 75% instead of 250. So Druid copping an L so far. Frenzied Region is no longer decreased by 20% for Feral. Mana regeneration is now reduced by, oh my god, 50% from 45. And healing is gutted by 5%. Yeah, Druid took a huge L with this patch going up. I'm not even gonna lie. Rigid Ice increases the amount of damage required to cancel Frost Nova by 20% instead of 80. That's kind of huge. And it looks like all of the Emirdrasel sets are basically getting gutted in PvP for Mage, Priest, and Windwalker Monk. Well, Windwalker Monk is getting reduced by 80% instead of 60. So I hope you still got your PvP sets, guys, because it doesn't look like Emirdrasel's cutting it anymore. Eviscerate's damage is now reduced by 10% in PvP combat. And Shamans lose 12% of their armor in PvP. 12.5% of their armor in PvP. Yikes. That's not okay. Warlock's Nightmare increases the amount of damage required to cancel fear by 30% instead of 60. And Demon Skin only increases your armor by 22.5 to 45% in PvP instead of 45% to 90%. Armored to the Teeth effectiveness is increased by 45% in PvP. And Anger Management now reduces Recklessness and Ravager's cooldown by 1 second per 15 rage, from 20 rage. So yeah, it seems like a lot of classes got dialed back in PvP. So you might want to go and check on your mains in the Battlegrounds, make sure they're alright. For the quest, players who are trying to turn in the raid quest Avarice, the Shadow Crucible Sarkareth, but are unable to, should return to the Seat of the Aspects in Valdrakken and find Abyssian. He should allow you to turn in the quest now. And they fixed an issue with the research quests of the Azerothian archives, where all players could see the arcane familiar being summoned whenever any player began them. So what that means is there was a quest that I was trying to do. It was all the way up at the north of the main city zone. I can't remember. Valdrakken, I think. You guys know the zone. But there was a chest everyone was trying to do, and it kept resetting itself. So I think that's what got fixed. And they added a plank in Gilneas to allow players to complete the quest What Tomorrow Brings. In patch 10.2.6, they will remove the gates and also the plank as well to allow players to complete the quest as tended. So the plank in Gilneas is kind of a temporary fix. Also, Phase 2 of Season of Discovery will be going live in February 8th. What this means is that players can level from 25 to 40 and earn up to 31 additional talent points, and take on the challenge of Nomergon as a new raid dungeon and discover new abilities. So essentially, Season of Discovery is about to get even more discovery as you can evolve and develop your class in exactly the way you want to. And then we have the Arena World Championships and Mythic Dungeon Internationals, not Invitationals, Internationals, that are coming up for 2024. And yeah, that's more or less everything. And also, you know, Call of the Scarab's here, but who really cares about Call of the Scarab? I mean, really, you're not getting the Black Karaji Beetle. That mount's long gone. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap this video up. If you guys enjoyed it, subscribe for more, as I do upload these dailies, and we are pushing towards 100 subscribers. And with that, I'm the Alliance Orc, and I will see you guys next time.